A civilization older than Rome, with cities more advanced than many in the modern world. Welcome to the world of ancient India, a land of wisdom, wonder, and world-changing ideas. This isn't just a story about kings and battles. This is the story of a civilization that gave the world zero, yoga, Buddhism, and some of the most advanced urban planning, medicine, and spiritual philosophy ever conceived. From the stone tools of prehistoric tribes to the mathematical marvels of the Gupta Age, from the mystical chants of the Vedas to the towering trade ports of the Sangam era, we're diving deep into over 5,000 years of rich history, layered culture, and ancient wisdom. In this video, we're going to explore how ancient India evolved through its religions, languages, empires, art, science, and philosophies. You'll learn about underground drainage systems older than London, democratic republics before Athens, and spiritual revolutions that shaped the East and inspired the West. So grab your chai, sit back, and get ready for a journey through time, because this isn't just history. This is ancient India. Let's begin. Before the rise of mighty empires, before Sanskrit hymns echoed through sacred halls, there was a time when the story of India was written in stone and silence. Welcome to Prehistoric India, the dawn of human life on the subcontinent. This era takes us back thousands of years, to a time when early humans lived in caves, hunted with sharpened stones, and painted their lives on rock walls. One of the most fascinating windows into this age lies deep in the heart of Madhya Pradesh, the Bhimbetka rock shelters. Carved into rocky cliffs and surrounded by dense forests, these shelters are home to prehistoric cave paintings that are over 10,000 years old. They depict dancing figures, animal hunts, and tribal rituals, a powerful glimpse into how our ancestors saw their world. But the story doesn't stop there. Far to the northwest, in what is today Balochistan, Pakistan, lies Mehrgarh, an ancient farming village dated around 7000 BCE. This site is considered one of the oldest agricultural settlements in South Asia, even older than Egypt's pyramids. Here, people lived in mud brick houses, grew wheat and barley, and raised domesticated animals, signaling the birth of early civilization. Archaeologists have found stone tools, pottery, and even evidence of early dentistry. Yes, they were drilling teeth 9,000 years ago. Together, places like Bhimbetka and Mehrgarh show us that India's roots run incredibly deep, deeper than most realize. Before the temples, before the empires, there was innovation, creativity, and survival. The prehistoric era laid the first stones on which all of ancient India would rise. Next, we move from early farms and cave art to one of the most mysterious and advanced ancient cities ever built. After the age of caves and farming villages came something truly astonishing. A civilization so advanced that even today we're still trying to decode its secrets. This is the Indus Valley Civilization, also known as the Harappan Civilization, one of the oldest urban cultures in the world, flourishing around 2600 BCE to 1900 BCE. At its peak, it spanned over 1 million square kilometers, covering parts of modern-day India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. And at the heart of this civilization were cities, but not just any cities. They were masterpieces of urban planning. Cities like Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Dholavira, and Lothal were built on grid layouts, with straight roads, carefully measured blocks, and a level of organization that rivaled even modern planning. But what truly sets them apart? Sanitation. These people had covered drainage systems, public baths, separate wells for drinking and bathing, and even multi-storied houses with private toilets. Imagine that. 4,500 years ago. Their cities weren't chaotic, they were engineered. Standardized bricks were used across regions. Weighing systems and measuring tools were consistent, an early sign of a centralized authority or trade regulation. And yes, they traded. From Mesopotamian tablets, we know that Harappan merchants were shipping goods like cotton textiles, beads, and pottery across the seas. In return, they imported items like lapis lazuli, silver, and tin. But who were these people? That's still a mystery. They left behind thousands of stone seals. intricately carved with animals, deities, and a unique undeciphered script. To this day we can't read their language. No Rosetta Stone, no bilingual inscriptions, just silent symbols from a forgotten tongue. They also crafted terracotta figurines of women, bulls, and even what appears to be a prototype of Shiva sitting in a yogic posture, hinting at early spiritual practices. But then, around 1900 BCE, it all began to fade. Cities were abandoned, trade slowed down, and the great Harappan civilization vanished. Why? Theories range from massive river shifts, like the drying of the Saraswati River, to climate change, droughts, or even a gradual societal decline due to ecological stress. What's clear is this: no signs of invasion or war have been found. This was likely not a fall of violence, but of nature. Today what remains are ruins and questions. How did they govern? What did they believe? And most haunting of all, why did such brilliance disappear without a trace? Next we step into a new era, where sacred hymns replaced silent scripts, and the Vedic age reshaped the identity of ancient India. As the echoes of the Indus Valley faded into dust, a new chapter began in the Indian subcontinent. A chapter sung, not written, in verses of divine hymns and sacred chants. This was the Vedic age, beginning around 1500 BCE, named after the Vedas, the oldest sacred texts of India. But who brought these hymns? Many scholars point to the Aryan migration theory, the idea that Indo-European speaking pastoralists migrated into the Indian subcontinent from Central Asia. Others suggest a more gradual integration with existing cultures rather than a full-scale invasion. Whatever the case, what emerged was a powerful fusion of ideas, languages, and beliefs that shaped the spiritual and social fabric of India for millennia. The Vedas, composed in Vedic Sanskrit, were not written at first. They were passed down orally, word, for centuries. A tradition so precise that even today, some chants are recited in the exact same tone, rhythm, and pronunciation as they were over 3,000 years ago. These texts spoke of a world ruled by powerful deities: Indra, the thunder-wielding warrior king of the gods; Agni, the sacred fire that carried offerings to the heavens; and Soma, both a god and a mysterious plant, believed to bring divine ecstasy. Worship was centered around yajnas, ritual fire sacrifices performed to maintain cosmic order and please the gods. During this time, the early Varna system began to form, a social structure based on duties and roles. Brahmins, priests, and scholars are traditionally recognized as priests and scholars within the Hindu Varna system, historically holding the highest status and performing religious rituals, including those associated with births, deaths, and marriages. They are also known for their role as educators and guardians of sacred knowledge. Kshatriyas, warriors and rulers, were seen as warriors and rulers tasked with maintaining order and protecting their communities. This foundational role continued into the Maurya Empire, where Kshatriyas led military campaigns and governed vast territories. Vaishyas, traders and farmers, are a Hindu caste traditionally known for their occupations as traders and farmers. They are considered the third highest caste in the Hindu caste system, and their traditional roles have historically shaped India's economy. Shudras, laborers and servants, represent the lowest of the four Varnas, primarily associated with labor and service. Unlike the rigid caste system we associate today, this early system was more fluid, based more on one's role than one's birth, at least in the beginning. Society was pastoral and tribal. People lived in Janapadas, small clans or communities governed by rajas or chieftains. Assemblies like the Sabha and Samiti existed, suggesting early forms of participatory governance where elders debated and made decisions. And amidst all this, culture thrived. Music, poetry, astronomy, and philosophy began to take root, long before formal empires or kingdoms. The Vedic age laid down not just religion, but the blueprint of society, from family roles and rituals to governance and ethics. Next, we enter the age of kingdoms, conquests, and spiritual revolutions, where sages walked alongside emperors, and empires rose from the banks of the Ganga. As kingdoms expanded and cities grew, a quiet revolution was taking shape. not in the battlefield, but in the mind and soul. India was entering a period of deep spiritual exploration. The focus began to shift from outer rituals to inner reflection. This era saw the birth of the Upanishads, mystical and philosophical texts that questioned the meaning of life, death, and existence itself. Unlike the earlier Vedas that focused on elaborate rituals and sacrifices, the Upanishads dove into consciousness, soul, and the nature of reality. They introduced profound concepts that would shape Indian thought forever: Atman, the inner self or soul; Brahman, the ultimate formless reality that permeates everything; Dharma, righteous duty and moral order; Karma, the law of cause and effect; Moksha, liberation from the cycle of birth and death. These ideas were radical for their time. They declared that divinity wasn't just in fire or sky, but within you. To explore these truths, a new path was evolving: yoga. Not the fitness routines we know today, but a disciplined spiritual practice meant to unite the self, or Atman, with the universal, or Brahman. Through meditation, breath control, ethical living, and mental clarity, yoga aimed for self-realization. This was a transition from ritualism to introspection, from priests to philosophers, from outer offerings to inner awakening. These teachings weren't confined to temples or elites. They were discussed in forests, hermitages, and even royal courts, sparking a spiritual dialogue that welcomed questions, doubt, and debate. And just like that, ancient India became not only a land of kings and warriors, but also of seekers and sages, searching not for wealth or conquest, but for truth. As spiritual ideas matured in the forests, power struggles intensified on the plains. Around 600 BCE, India transformed again, this time politically, with the emergence of the Mahajanapadas, 16 great states that would dominate the subcontinent. Some were monarchies ruled by kings, like Magadha, Kosala, and Kashi, but others were surprisingly ahead of their time. Republics where assemblies debated laws and policies. One shining example, Vaishali, in the region of the Vajji Confederacy, often considered one of the world's first democratic republics. Here decisions weren't made by a single ruler, but by a Sabha, a council of elders and clan leaders. It was a political system that valued collective leadership and debate. Meanwhile, monarchic states like Magadha began building powerful militaries, forming alliances and vying for dominance. Fortified cities, cavalry units, and iron weaponry became common. Trade flourished, with growing urban centers connected by river routes and roads. Markets bustled with goods, spices, textiles, metals, and grains. Coins, punch-marked silver pieces, began circulating, marking a shift from barter to monetary economy. This dynamic era set the stage for everything that would follow: powerful empires, philosophical revolutions, and new religions. The Indian subcontinent was now a chessboard of kingdoms and republics, thinkers and warriors, each influencing the destiny of this ancient land. Next, we explore how two new faiths, Buddhism and Jainism, would challenge the status quo, and a king named Ashoka would change the meaning of power forever. In the midst of growing kingdoms and ritualistic power, a revolution of the mind began. Around 6th century BCE, two spiritual leaders emerged, not with weapons but with questions. They challenged the dominance of ritual, the caste order, and the endless cycles of material desire. First came Mahavira, the 24th Tirthankara of Jainism. He renounced royal life to seek truth, and found it not in power or prayer, but in nonviolence, or ahimsa. To a Jain, every living being, no matter how small, is sacred. Followers practiced extreme self-discipline, asceticism, and truthfulness, often going barefoot and sweeping the ground before each step to avoid harming life. Then came Siddhartha Gautama, the prince who would become the Buddha. Haunted by sights of suffering, he left his palace in search of deeper understanding. Under the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, after years of meditation, he achieved enlightenment. His realization: life is full of suffering. But suffering can end. The path lies in the middle way, a life of moderation, mindfulness, and compassion. He taught the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, and rejected rigid caste structures, offering spiritual liberation to all, from kings to commoners. These ideas spread rapidly, especially when embraced by India's greatest emperor, Ashoka of the Mauryan Empire. After the horrors of war, Ashoka turned to Buddhism, promoting it through edicts, monasteries, and missions across Asia. Buddhism traveled the Silk Road, reaching Sri Lanka, China, and Southeast Asia, becoming one of the most influential spiritual movements in history. At home, these movements challenged Brahmanical dominance. Animal sacrifices declined, rituals gave way to meditation, and the hierarchical caste system faced serious moral scrutiny. A new era had dawned, one where compassion, nonviolence, and introspection were celebrated more than status, wealth, or birth. Coming up next, the story of India's first true empire and the emperor who tried to unite it all under one banner, Chandragupta Maurya and the rise of the Mauryan Empire. From scattered kingdoms to a vast unified empire, this was the birth of India's first great dynasty, the Maurya Empire. Around 321 BCE, a bold young man named Chandragupta Maurya, guided by the brilliant strategist Chanakya, overthrew the Nanda dynasty. Together, they built an empire that stretched across most of the Indian subcontinent, from modern-day Afghanistan to Bengal, from the Himalayas to the Deccan Plateau. Chanakya, also known as Kautilya, penned the Arthashastra, a groundbreaking manual on statecraft, economics, diplomacy, and espionage. It detailed everything from tax policies to spy networks, and it laid the foundation for a highly centralized and disciplined administration. Under Chandragupta and his successors, especially Bindusara and later Ashoka, the empire flourished. But it was Emperor Ashoka who would leave the deepest mark, not just on India, but on the world. After a brutal campaign to conquer Kalinga, Ashoka witnessed the horrific toll of war, over 100,000 dead. Shaken to his core, the emperor turned away from violence and toward Buddhism. This was more than personal transformation. It was a revolution in leadership. Ashoka embraced the Buddhist ideals of nonviolence, ahimsa, compassion, and moral governance, and made them state policy. He inscribed these values across the empire on rock edicts and pillar inscriptions in languages like Prakrit, Greek, and Aramaic. These Ashokan edicts spoke of religious tolerance, justice, and welfare, urging people to live ethically and harmoniously. He built roads, hospitals, rest houses, and sent Buddhist emissaries as far as Sri Lanka, Egypt, and Greece. His reign was one of peaceful expansion through ideas, not armies. Ashoka's rule marked one of the world's earliest attempts at ethical empire building. Under him, the Mauryan administration ran like a well-oiled machine, with departments for agriculture, commerce, justice, and even a sophisticated spy system to ensure law and order. Rare in world history, here was an emperor who conquered not with the sword, but with the mind and heart. As the Maurya Empire reached its peak, so did the influence of India, politically, culturally, and spiritually. Next we'll witness the ebb of empires, and the rise of regional powers, global trade, and golden ages. Stay with us. While the Mauryas shaped the north, a different cultural brilliance flourished in the south during what's known as the Sangam Age. Spanning roughly 300 BCE to 300 CE, this was the age of the Tamil dynasties, the Cholas, Cheras, and Pandyas, each ruling over rich and powerful kingdoms across what is today Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and parts of Sri Lanka. The crown jewel of this era was Sangam literature, a vast body of ancient Tamil poetry, composed by learned poets and bards, many of whom were women. These poems weren't mere praise of kings, they delved into love, war, ethics, landscape, heroism, and the emotions of ordinary people, making it one of the world's earliest and most humanistic literary traditions. The Sangam Age was also deeply connected to the sea. Ports like Korkai, Muziris, and Puhar, Kavaripatanam, buzzed with maritime trade, exporting pearls, spices, ivory, and fine textiles to Rome, Arabia, Southeast Asia, and beyond. Roman coins found in Tamil Nadu tell tales of bustling Indo-Roman commerce. Governance was both monarchical and local. While kings held court, Village assemblies and clan councils handled everyday affairs, a form of proto-democracy at the grassroots. Notably, many communities followed matrilineal traditions, where inheritance and lineage were traced through the mother, not the father, a unique social structure in ancient India. In the shade of palm groves and beside roaring seas, the Sangam Age birthed a refined, literary and globally connected civilization, one that still echoes in modern Tamil identity. As the South thrived, the North would soon enter an age of classical grandeur, led by one of India's most celebrated dynasties, the Guptas. From the 4th to the 6th century CE, India witnessed a period of unprecedented intellectual and cultural flowering under the reign of the Gupta Empire. Founded by Chandragupta I and expanded by Samudragupta and Chandragupta II, Vikramaditya, this empire stretched across most of the Indian subcontinent, creating a climate of peace, prosperity, and patronage. Science and mathematics flourished. The genius Aryabhata, writing in the 5th century, introduced the concept of zero, calculated pi with astounding accuracy, and proposed that the Earth rotates on its axis, centuries before Copernicus. In literature, Sanskrit reached its zenith. Poets like Kalidasa wrote immortal plays like Shakuntala and Meghaduta, blending romance, nature, and philosophy with poetic finesse. His works are still celebrated for their lyrical beauty and dramatic depth. Medicine, too, saw groundbreaking advancements. Texts like the Sushruta Samhita and Charaka Samhita laid the foundation for surgery, diagnosis, herbal treatments, and even plastic surgery. Sushruta described procedures for cataract removal and reconstructive techniques that stun modern historians. Education was institutionalized in a way rarely seen elsewhere in the ancient world. At Nalanda University, thousands of students from across Asia, including China, Korea, and Tibet, gathered to study Buddhism, mathematics, medicine, logic, and the Vedas. This vast university complex, complete with dormitories and libraries, was an early model of global higher education. In art and architecture, the Gupta period saw the rise of the Nagara style of Hindu temples with elegant shikaras, towers, carved pillars, and intricate deities sculpted in stone. Cave temples in Ajanta and Ellora, although patronized by later rulers as well, echo Gupta aesthetics: serene Buddhas, dancing apsaras, and divine narratives frozen in time. This was India's classical age, where logic met poetry, science met spirituality, and beauty was born from knowledge. But as the Guptas faded, power began to fragment, and new dynasties emerged in the post-classical landscape. Long before the rise of modern institutions, education in ancient India was deeply immersive, rooted in tradition, discipline, and direct transmission of wisdom. At the heart of it all was the Gurukul system, a sacred bond between guru, teacher, and shishya, student. Students lived at their teacher's home, often in forest hermitages away from the distractions of city life. Here they studied everything from the Vedas, philosophy, astronomy, grammar, mathematics, to ethics and statecraft, not just through texts but through daily life, service, and deep listening. Oral learning was the norm, with students memorizing vast amounts of material through rhythm, repetition, and debate. Techniques like chandas, metrical structure, and mnemonic chanting ensured perfect recall across generations, preserving texts like the Rig Veda, which spans over 10,000 verses. Learning was not passive. Debate was central, with forums like Shastrartha, where students and scholars would challenge ideas in logic, metaphysics, and linguistics, sharpening minds and expanding thought. In major cities and religious centers, libraries flourished, filled with palm leaf manuscripts and scrolls in Sanskrit, Prakrit, and regional languages. Universities like Nalanda, Takshashila, and Vikramashila housed thousands of scholars from across Asia, and translation projects made Indian knowledge available in Tibetan, Chinese, Persian, and later Arabic, influencing global science and medicine. Remarkably, women too were part of this intellectual tradition. Figures like Gargi and Maitreyi from the Upanishadic era debated philosophy with sages and kings, asking profound questions about existence, the soul, and truth. Their voices echo through history, reminding us that the quest for knowledge knew no gender. Education in ancient India wasn't just about facts, it was about nurturing wisdom, discipline, and the inner self. As India moved into the medieval era, new empires and cultural shifts would reshape how knowledge was stored, spread, and preserved. In the ancient world, India wasn't just a land of ideas and philosophies, it was also a land of innovation, engineering, and practical genius. One of the most iconic examples is the Iron Pillar of Delhi, standing tall for over 1,600 years. Despite exposure to harsh weather, it remains corrosion-resistant, a feat of metallurgical excellence still studied by scientists today. Its composition, with high phosphorus content and low sulfur, showcases advanced ironworking skills, centuries ahead of their time. In an often unpredictable climate, water was sacred and strategically managed. From the stepwells of Gujarat and Rajasthan, like Rani Ki Vav, to the advanced irrigation canals of the Chola dynasty, ancient Indians mastered rainwater harvesting, groundwater access, and seasonal storage. These structures were not only functional, they were architectural masterpieces, often adorned with carvings and sculptures. Urban planning wasn't new to India either. The cities of the Indus Valley Civilization, like Mohenjo-daro, had grid layouts, multi-story homes, and central drainage systems that many modern towns still struggle to replicate. Houses were aligned to catch prevailing winds, and even public baths with water heating systems existed more than 4,000 years ago. Timekeeping also saw innovation. Ancient Indian texts describe water clocks, sundials, and astronomical instruments used to track celestial events and religious calendars with astonishing precision. In coastal regions, shipbuilding and navigation flourished. Ports like Lothal had dry docks, and sailors used star charts, monsoon winds, and magnetic techniques to reach Arabia, Southeast Asia, and even Africa, making India a vital node in ancient global trade. India was also renowned for its textile craftsmanship. From fine muslin of Bengal, so sheer it was called woven air, to vibrant silks and dyes that fascinated Roman and Chinese traders alike. These technologies weren't just about survival, they were about adapting to nature, elevating daily life, and connecting civilizations across continents. As the ancient world gave way to the medieval, India's knowledge systems and innovations would merge with new ideas from traders, travelers, and conquerors, creating a dynamic cultural synthesis. Beyond kings and wars, empires and philosophies, culture is where history truly comes alive. And in ancient India, life pulsed with color, language, music, and tradition. Across the vast subcontinent, languages flourished, each rooted in region, caste, and context. Sanskrit, the classical language of the elite, was used in rituals, science, and sacred texts. Prakrit served as the common tongue, especially in early Jain and Buddhist literature, bridging the learned and the layperson. In the south, Tamil rose as one of the world's oldest surviving classical languages, its poetry and grammar formalized in the Sangam era, still read and revered today. Clothing was both aesthetic and functional. Men often wore dhotis or langotis, while women adorned themselves in saris or single-cloth drapes, varying by region. Jewelry was abundant, crafted in gold, silver, ivory, and beads, not only for ornamentation but also as symbols of status and spirituality. Even terracotta figurines from the Harappan age show intricate hairstyles, bangles, and necklaces. Daily meals were simple yet flavorful. Rice, wheat, lentils, ghee, and spices like turmeric, cumin, and pepper formed the base of ancient cuisine. Food was deeply ritualistic, often tied to Ayurveda and seasons, with distinctions between sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic diets. The position of women evolved over centuries. In early Vedic times, women like Gargi and Maitreyi were revered scholars and debated alongside male sages. But over time, especially in later periods, social restrictions grew, limiting their roles in education and public life, although exceptions always persisted. Family structures were typically patriarchal, but in certain regions like Kerala or the Northeast, matrilineal traditions shaped society. Marriages were mostly arranged, often sealed with elaborate rituals, gifts, and fire ceremonies. Festivals brought communities together, many of which have evolved into the celebrations we know today. The ancient spring festival of Holika gave rise to Holi, the festival of colors. The autumnal harvest and light rituals linked to Lakshmi worship became Diwali, the festival of lights. And across India, countless regional deities, nature worship, and seasonal festivals colored daily life with rhythm and joy. In every corner of ancient India, whether in a Himalayan village or a Tamil port town, culture was the thread that tied society together. From this vibrant tapestry of languages, food, traditions, and faith, India stepped forward into the medieval period, where it would encounter new influences, face invasions, and craft a blended cultural identity. In ancient India, art wasn't merely decoration. It was devotion, expression, and legacy carved in stone, sung in melody, and danced in rhythm. Start with the walls of Bhimbetka, where prehistoric cave paintings show stick-like figures hunting, dancing, and living, some over 10,000 years old. These early visuals were humanity's first canvas, preserved in ochre and charcoal. Fast forward to the Ajanta and Ellora caves, architectural marvels carved straight into rock between the 2nd century BCE and 8th century CE. Ajanta's Buddhist murals burst with life, gods, royalty, monks, and nature, painted in exquisite detail and vibrant pigments. Ellora, on the other hand, stands as a symbol of religious harmony, housing Buddhist, Hindu, and Jain monuments, including the awe-inspiring Kailasa temple, hewn from a single rock. Across the Indian subcontinent, temple architecture evolved into two dominant styles. In the north, the Nagara style featured curved spires, shikaras, and elevated platforms, seen in the majestic temples of Khajuraho and Konark. In the south, the Dravidian style showcased pyramidal towers, gopurams, detailed carvings, and enclosed complexes, like the Brihadiswara Temple of Tamil Nadu, a marvel in granite and geometry. Art wasn't just visual, it echoed through sound. Ancient India's music system was sophisticated and spiritual, rooted in the concept of ragas, melodic frameworks tied to emotions, times of day, and seasons. Instruments like the veena, mridangam, flute, and dhol enriched rituals, theater, and court life. These musical traditions were codified in the Natya Shastra, a 2,000-year-old Sanskrit treatise by Bharata Muni, which laid the foundation for Indian classical dance and drama. From it emerged Bharatanatyam, a sacred dance form that blended storytelling, expression, abhinaya, and rhythm, a living tradition that survives to this day. Temples doubled as stages. Dance wasn't just art, it was worship in motion. Statues of dancers frozen mid-step on temple walls remind us this was a culture where art and the divine were one. In every sculpture, melody, and motif, ancient India spoke, and the world still listens. From bustling ports to vast overland routes, ancient India was never isolated. It was deeply interconnected with the ancient world. As early as the 3rd millennium BCE, the Indus Valley Civilization was trading with Mesopotamia, exporting beads, cotton textiles, and lapis lazuli. But this was only the beginning. By the 1st century BCE, India had become a powerhouse of global trade, sought after for its spices, textiles, ivory, pearls, and gemstones. On the western coast, ports like Baruch, Muziris, and Sopara buzzed with ships from Rome and Egypt, arriving with gold, wine, and glassware, leaving behind Roman coins, amphorae, and historical texts praising Indian goods. To the east, maritime routes stretched across the Bay of Bengal, linking India with Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Indonesia. Indian merchants and monks didn't just carry cargo, they carried culture and spirituality. Buddhism spread peacefully from India to Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, and China, influencing art, architecture, and philosophy. The grand temples of Angkor Wat, the serene faces of Borobudur, and the carved caves of Dunhuang all whisper echoes of India's spiritual exports. Meanwhile, Indian cotton cloth was so prized that it reached China via the Silk Road, and was worn across the ancient world long before the industrial looms of the West. But perhaps India's most profound contribution was intellectual Indian numerals, including the concept of zero, traveled westward through Arab scholars. These Hindu numerals eventually became the foundation of the modern number system, shaping math, science, and commerce globally. In essence, India was not just trading goods, it was shaping civilizations, a cultural lighthouse, an economic hub, and a spiritual wellspring. Ancient India's influence stretched far beyond its borders, and its legacy still runs deep in our modern world. Even golden ages must come to an end. By the mid-6th century CE, the mighty Gupta Empire, once the beacon of science, art, and prosperity, began to crumble. Repeated invasions from the Hunas, nomadic tribes from Central Asia, weakened the empire. Internal dissent, declining trade networks, and overextension strained its core. As the Guptas faded, India fractured into many regional powers, each preserving pieces of the ancient legacy, yet also shaping their own regional identities. In the north, the great king Harshavardhana emerged, uniting parts of northern India by the 7th century. He promoted literature, education, and diplomacy, even sending embassies to China, fostering cross-cultural ties. In the south, dynasties like the Pallavas and Chalukyas rose to prominence. The Pallavas, from their capital at Kanchipuram, were patrons of Dravidian temple architecture and Sanskrit scholarship. The Chalukyas, ruling from Badami, left behind cave temples and inscriptions reflecting both Shaivite and Vaishnavite traditions. These kingdoms continued to flourish independently, setting the stage for medieval India's rich regional cultures. Meanwhile, India's coasts remained open to the world. Long before Islam arrived in the subcontinent through conquests, it came peacefully through trade. In Kerala, pre-Islamic Arab traders had already been docking for centuries, exchanging spices and stories. These early connections paved the way for multiculturalism, and later the arrival of Islam via both trade and empire. This was not a collapse but a transformation. As the curtain began to close on ancient India, it handed its torch to a diverse and dynamic medieval age, where old philosophies mingled with new faiths, where trade routes turned into spiritual highways, and where the past continued to echo in every temple bell and turning prayer wheel. The story of ancient India isn't just history, it's a living heritage. From your morning yoga session to the numbers you use every day, ancient India still pulses through our modern lives. Yoga, once practiced by rishis in forests, is now a global movement of wellness and inner peace. The concept of zero, decimal systems, and advanced mathematics laid down by scholars like Aryabhata and Brahmagupta form the backbone of today's technology. Ayurveda, with its focus on balance and natural healing, continues to influence modern medicine and holistic health. Meditation techniques, once preserved in caves and temples, are now embraced by millions seeking mental clarity and emotional resilience. Around the world, there's a renewed interest in India's ancient knowledge systems, from quantum physics enthusiasts exploring Upanishadic ideas to doctors examining ancient surgical texts like the Sushruta Samhita. UNESCO has recognized sites like Nalanda, Ajanta, and Mohenjo-daro as World Heritage Treasures, a nod to India's intellectual and cultural legacy. And yet so much remains buried, misunderstood, or forgotten. But that's changing. New generations of researchers, historians, and storytellers are uncovering truths, reinterpreting colonial narratives, and reclaiming pride in a civilization that once lit the path for the world. Ancient India wasn't just a chapter in history, it was a civilizational compass, pointing toward unity, depth, and discovery. And its legacy, still unfolding, still evolving, one idea, one breath, and one rediscovered scroll at a time. We've traveled across thousands of years, from the hunter-gatherers of Bhimbetka to the mathematicians of Nalanda, from the philosophers of the Upanishads to the builders of temples that still awe the world. This wasn't just a civilization, this was a world-changing legacy. Ancient India gave humanity ideas that still shape us, in science, medicine, philosophy, and spiritual understanding. It built cities with drainage systems before Rome had roads. It questioned the self, the soul, and the universe when the rest of the world still asked about survival. It showed that greatness isn't always conquest. Sometimes it's wisdom, balance, and harmony. Now it's your turn. Which part of ancient India fascinated you most? Was it the mystery of the Indus script, the philosophy of moksha and karma, the university at Nalanda, or the legacy of Ashoka's edicts? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read everyone. And if you want to explore more forgotten chapters of history, subscribe and join us for the next deep dive into civilizations that shaped our world. Because history isn't just in books, it's in us, and it's calling to be remembered.